Edge trigger, slope trigger, and timeout trigger have been introduced in the previous video. And today, we will introduce pulse width triggers. Pulse width trigger sets the oscilloscope to trigger on a positive or negative pulse of a specified width. Click the Trig menu button to enter the trigger settings. Trigger type is selected for pulse width trigger. Polarity can be either positive or negative. Positive polarity, triggered when the positive polarity pulse width of the signal is set. Negative polarity, triggered when the signal negative polarity pulse width is set. We first measured the positive pulse width of the signal using the automatic measurement function, and the positive pulse width of the signal is 500 S. Next, select the trigger conditions. There are 4 trigger conditions. Equal to time value, in the plus or minus 5% tolerance range. The waveform is triggered when the pulse of the signal is equal to the set pulse width. For example, for a positive pulse, we set the pulse width to 5 to I. At this time, the trigger condition equal to the time value is satisfied, and the waveform can be triggered stably. Not equal to time value, in the plus or minus 5% tolerance range. The waveform is triggered when the pulse of the signal is not equal to the set pulse width. Fine-tune the set pulse width value, and you can see that the waveform is stably triggered. Greater than the time value. Waveform triggers when the source signal pulse width is greater than the set pulse width. At this time, the trigger conditions greater than the time values are satisfied, and the waveform can be triggered stably. By increasing the pulse width, we can see that the waveform does not trigger stably. Less than the time value. The waveform is triggered when the source signal pulse width is less than a certain pulse width. At this time, the trigger conditions smaller than the time values are satisfied, and the waveform can be triggered stably. By turning the pulse width down, we can see that the waveform does not trigger stably. The trigger release and suppression are described in detail in the Edge trigger explanation video, and interested parties can go to watch it.